All right, so we've been doing this one for, I think this is my fourth one, and really, in all seriousness, is a great way to end this great day because there were a lot of tremendous speakers, but at the end of the day, to my left are five of the top individuals in our industry, and they're always so nice to come and talk and give their candid response. And I usually like to get it towards the end of the day because they're a little tired, so they're a little more open. But let me start with a couple slides about what we're trying to do here of the Masters of the Universe. So you can see here that each one of them has their own significance as a master of their universe. But what we heard today, and what I'm going to start hitting these gentlemen with questions, are around four what I consider keys to success, around innovation, productivity, efficiency, a vibrant industry, and collaborative relationships. If you think about what we heard, somewhere along the line, these four topics were hit. We have many positive forces helping our industry with unmet needs, strong global demand, strategics and startups, and a progressive, engaged physician community. And obviously, we have some challenges from regulatory to reimbursement to gaps in access to care. If you think about then as we go forward, the hot topics that have changed over the last couple of years are health IT and data management. Practitioners are constantly requesting from us more data, more information, how they follow their patients, et cetera. We have the consolidation in the evolving industry landscape. We've got patients now asking doctors while they're there, why am I getting this treatment? Why am I paying this treatment? And then, of course, we've got the roles of the small and nimble providers versus the large multinational players. So what I'd like to do is, usually what I do is I ask one question to each of the five panelists, and then I've got several questions that I'm going to try to get two or three gentlemen to address. And so I'll do the first one, and I don't need to introduce these gentlemen. If you don't know who these gentlemen are, I don't know where the hell you've been the last several years. So let me start with Jeff. Jeff, you've done a tremendous job in a short period of time to accelerate growth at Alcon, which has really picked up significantly. What are you doing to really ramp up innovation in order to fuel this future growth?
So thanks for the question, Jim. I joined last May, and I think May year-to-date last year we were growing less than 3% top line, and profits were slightly down. And so we had a couple good quarters, but it's early days. I think we're not growing double-digit like Mike and the team are doing at B&L, but growing 6 to 8% the back half of the year top line, a couple quarters of double-digit growth bottom line. But ultimately, it's really all about innovation, and we're very focused at Alcon on accelerating innovation. I think that, frankly, our innovation lagged in the past 5 to 10 years, and so that's been a big part of what we've been working to do. If I look across the three platforms of our business, about an $11 billion business in eye care. In surgical, we have really been focused on not only leveraging some great innovation that's happened. When I look at Centurion, which is a new state-of-the-art phacoemulsification platform for cataract surgery, we placed about 2,900 units, and that's been a nice boon to the business. But we're really focused on mid to long term. So we've really placed a lot of bets in the IOL space. We've taken the number of projects from about 9 when I started. I think we had 9 last June. We're up to about 25 projects right now, and some exciting new launches that we're planning right now coming later this year in Europe in the trifocal and preloaded space. We had an approval today or a couple days ago from FDA and just got dual aspect reimbursement. If I look at the pharma space, which is still our largest business, both pharma and surgical are about $4.2, $4.1 billion last year. And we've been very focused on the retina space. This is going to be a huge growth driver for the future. I'm very excited about the phase 2 clinical trials that we've seen vis-a-vis Lucentis and Eylea in the head-to-heads in terms of efficacy with good prolonged duration of action. I look at the double-digit growth that we're driving in dry eye and our fixed-dose glaucoma combinations like Simbrinza and Azarga. Really excited about those spaces. There's still 67 million people with glaucoma, and about half of those don't even know that they have it. And then in the vision care space, which is a smaller business but still over $2.5 billion. We've been really focused on driving very innovative new contact lenses. So our Dailies Total One, which is a water gradient silicone hydrogel, has had great acceptance. Out of the gates, it's priced at a pretty big premium to J&J's product, but has been able to take about half the market in the U.S. despite a big price premium. So I think, and then things like the Google partnership, which we announced a few weeks after I joined, we're very focused on it. And part of it is just a philosophy that actually, if it's done in the right way, you can do early stage innovation well in big companies. I look at Novartis and, on the pharmaceutical side, the majority of our revenues today were developed, in-house, early stage. Products like Diaven with $6 billion in peak sales, or Gleevec at $4.5 billion in peak sales, or Tasigna and Afinitor in cancer, or even new products like LCZ or LCZ, which is going to be a multi-billion-dollar chronic heart failure product, or Cosentyx in autoimmune, which was just approved. So I come at it from a philosophy of saying, looking at the room here, and what you do is absolutely critical. I'm agnostic as to whether we're developing it within Alcon or with you. And as I think Laurent talked a little bit on the panel earlier, there's a tremendous amount of collaboration that we do with scientists and engineers and startup companies in the room. And so as Mike, as you talked about, I agree with your philosophy of both looking at internal and external levers for innovation. But it's something that it's the only way that we impact patients. We served 260 million patients last year at Alcon with our medicines and treatments. The only way we grow that is through innovation.
Ludwin, one of Zeiss's key goals is to stimulate and strengthen the innovation culture at Zeiss. How are you driving this forward? What's the energy behind this innovation cycle that you talk about?
Yeah, it's actually true that innovation is key to Zeiss, and let me explain why. Zeiss is a very old company. Actually, it's 170 years old, and we've been in medical technology for more than 100 years. And what our customers know us for is actually innovation. And there's a long series of firsts, of things that Zeiss brought to ophthalmology, and let me just mention some. The slit lamp was introduced to the market by Zeiss. Surgical microscope was invented by Zeiss. OCT was brought to the market first by Zeiss. Optical biometry was invented by Zeiss. And even, we talked about that earlier today, the trifocal IOL was brought to the market first by Zeiss. And there are actually many more. So that's what our customers know us for, and this is why innovation is so important to our company. What we focus on is patient outcome. We focus on efficacy, on safety, for a very simple reason. Our marketing is about facts. So this is why we actually need that. That is also looking forward what we need. And when you say, what are you doing to foster innovation at Zeiss? It is, I can simply summarize it. It's many things, but from my experience, the most powerful thing is to network the organization. To network the organization with physicians, to network the organization with research, with research institutes, universities, science in general, and of course to network the organization with other companies. We do not need to invent everything on our own.
Michael, interesting presentation today. I think Valeant has completed over 6 major acquisitions, including Bausch & Lomb in 13. It's not easy to acquire. People think sometimes the easiest part is to write a check. How do you evaluate your M&A potentials? You said everybody at Valeant is in charge of BD, if I heard you correctly today. How do you evaluate going along that way?
Sure. Is this working?
Yep.
Yeah, great. So we sort of have 2 screens when we look for acquisitions. One is a basic financial screen, which all companies are going to have. We all have the responsibility of whether we're private or public, earning a good return for our shareholders. So that probably is quite similar to most companies. What we do look for is we look for types of assets, opposed to a lot of companies will say we want to be number 1 in oncology, and they'll go out and try to figure out what oncology companies to buy. Our aspirations are to find markets and submarkets that fit a number of criteria. We look for good reimbursement, whether it's cash pay or private pay, so we're looking for good reimbursement. We're looking for underlying growth markets like ophthalmology, where it's just patient-driven growth. So it's a lot easier to compete in a market, especially when you have to compete against these guys. If it's all growing, then we can all win. And I think that's why we're all in ophthalmology. We look for markets where physicians still play the critical role in product selection. If you look at some areas of medicine in the United States and around the world, the physician really doesn't have much choice, and we think it's important if we're going to differentiate our products and through better outcomes and through science, that we want physicians to be part of the decision makers. And we look for assets that are durable, i.e. that, yes, we do have drugs that have patents, but we're looking for drugs where there's life cycle management opportunities. That's why we like medical devices. It's like why we like the surgery area. And so those are some of the kinds of characteristics we look for. So we have a screen, strategic screen, and then we have a financial screen. In terms of the actual integration, we continue to learn. Not all integrations go smoothly. We were lucky in the B&L integration. I think it went pretty well. Some of the things we've learned is we tend not to touch anything that touches the customer. So when we bought B&L, we made a commitment internally and externally that we were not going to change our sales forces. So we have not changed. There's been no sales representative or anyone facing the customer that has left our organization unless they're either not performing or they choose to leave, so that's very important. We get things at the back office we take care of very quickly. We try to make decisions very quickly. A lot of companies integrate things over years, and we try to integrate them over months or days, and get our focus back on the customer and not have our people worrying about, will I have a job in 3 months? I'm sure we make some decisions that are wrong by moving so quickly, but I'd rather make a wrong decision and fix it later than make no decision at all. So I think that's our philosophy. I think the fact that our company makes a fair amount of acquisitions has also built an internal capability that we're not terrible at it, and I think that helps as well.
Murthy, you talk about the continued success from more than 20 product launches now and over the next several years across major geographies. How do you balance the geographical desire? How do you balance versus the new technology development? And then what are the unmet clinical needs that you're really spending your time on?
Well, we try not to put the product portfolio and geographic expansion and competition. The way we manage it is we ask the question of what it takes to be successful in each priority country or geography. And out of that, there's invariably a few things you need to consider. The first is, do you have the right portfolio to compete in that geography? And if you don't, you might have to partner with others. You ask the question about, do you have the right leadership, the right capabilities, the right commercial footprint? Do we have a coherent global clinical and regulatory strategy that's run as efficiently as possible, just given the heterogeneity of regulations? And then you kind of list all of that out, and invariably out of this exercise, you do get a foundational global portfolio with some local nuance. For example, we have IOLs that were specifically developed for certain geographies. We have phaco platforms that were specifically developed for those geographies. Now, when you look at our global product platforms, you ask the question of what key unmet needs are we addressing? When it comes to IOLs, we are pretty focused on providing as many options and as much customization for physicians and patients, particularly for multifocal IOLs. That's a big focus for us. Now, if you look at the whole category of PC IOLs or multifocals, it's kind of stagnated, and we all know why. There's some inherent trade-offs, and the only way to grow the segment is to break those trade-offs. So there's a tremendous amount of focus also on lenses that provide an extended range of vision while trying to minimize dysphotopsias. That's a big focus. But there's also quite a bit of investment in what I would call improving the operational efficiencies and workflow in the OR. whether it's through innovations in phaco or laser cataract surgery or preloaded systems. And finally, the one big unmet need where I think industry has stagnated quite a bit is in LASIK technology. There just hasn't been a lot of new innovation, particularly in the United States, in LASIK. So we made a conscious decision to invest the most we have in almost a decade in re-energizing LASIK.
So Bill, you're sitting amongst these four strategic giants here, and you and Andy and a couple others were talking about how, it's your desire to help supplement their gaps. I think you mentioned something about that venture capital funding remained steady in 14 and it's getting a little better in 15. What subsectors within ophthalmology do you find to be the most desirable now for you as you look at assets?
We pay attention to that, Jim. And I hope it overlaps, entirely together, and it's not rocket science. It's the larger segments and those that are underserved. And so if we just parse through those, and I'll get 50 or 60% of it right, and all, but we've talked about presbyopia today. So there's the aging of the world's population, and again, it's a lifestyle issue rather than a disease-based issue. It's vision correction, but wow, wouldn't it be cool, if we had seamless near and far vision like we were 25 or 18. So presbyopia continues to be an area that we focus on, no pun intended. And then external disease as well, because it's complicated. Dry eye specifically is an area that we care a lot about, and the fact that it's complicated and it's probably not a single source of a problem adds to the challenge, but also adds to the opportunity. So dry eye as a category is an area that we watch a lot. Retinal disease, of course, and this is a disease, no kidding, a family of diseases, and it's age-related. And one of the things that I've mentioned before that I respect so much and appreciate about the ophthalmic sector, it's two parallel sectors. One is vision correction, and the other is age-related, or it's disease-based, and it's age-related diseases. A lot of the healthcare sectors that we focus on for innovation are primarily disease, or exclusively disease, and then age-related. And here we have two parallel large markets, and they tend to overlap as well. So those are just some examples, Jim, of what we think about.
Thanks, Bill. So I'm going to go right to Jeff and Ludwin on this, because I think when I thought about this question, I thought of your two entities immediately. The ability to capture and analyze patient data is so critical today for the physician. So Ludwin, tell me how you're helping physicians capture this data and what you see as the future, and then Jeff, build on that.
Yeah, we've actually done basically three things. The first is that we started 7-8 years ago to integrate standard interfaces into our devices that would allow to extract data. So we basically integrated DICOM interfaces so that our devices can store their data in a standardized way. That was step number one. Today, all our devices have such interfaces. The second step was then to establish what we call a data management platform. So now we have, it's called Forum. That's a data archive on the one hand, and it can actually make use of that data. So we've developed that platform, and we've installed it in thousands of accounts so far. So it really has a wide spread in the market. So that was level number two, and the third one is actually the interesting one, because now we help our customers to bring their historic data onto that platform, which is obviously key. If you think about glaucoma, for example, the historic patient data is key. And once we have that, we can do the analytics and data analytics. And here we started, and the glaucoma is the most obvious field. Where we call it workplaces. What it is basically is to make use of that data, to analyze the data, and provide additional insights. So that is the three-step approach which we've taken.
Jeff, want to build on that?
Yeah, just to maybe build on your comments, Levin, for us at Alcon, we're very focused on patient outcomes, and you referred to this, earlier. The whole intent strategically of creating an integrated cataract refractive suite, starting with, Varion, which is our preoperative surgical guidance and diagnostic system, through to femtosecond lasers and phacoemulsification platforms, through all the way to intraoperative aberrometry, is really about leveraging data in a way that we can continuously feed back that data to our software embedded within the hardware, through improving algorithms that really are going to change the way that patients are treated and improve patient outcomes. Let me give a specific example of what I mean. When we acquired a company called WaveTech, which many of you know, I think some of you may have seen the Dick Lindstrom video, and Tom Frinzi, who's the CEO of WaveTech, was speaking about Dick. And what Tom's company has done that's really been cool for us, and why we feel very good about integrating this with our cataract refractive suite, is if you look at the patient outcomes, leveraging intraoperative aberrometry, it's really a market difference. So we did a clinical trial before acquiring it, which we funded and did in collaboration with WaveTech, where we had 111 patients, and we did a contralateral observer masked, multi-center, randomized clinical study, where one eye in each of the patients was treated using the standard of care, using some of the best surgeons, some of whom were in the room around the world, many of them here in the U.S. The other eye was then treated using intraoperative aberrometry as an add-on to what they were already doing. And with astigmatic correction, what we saw is only about 76% of the time, some of the best surgeons in the world were getting to within half a diopter correction. Leveraging a better data platform and intraoperative aberrometry, it was closer to 90%, 89%. We'll continue to feed that data back in order to improve the algorithms and improve the patient outcomes. So that's the first way in terms of patient outcomes. I think a second thing that I'd mention is just smart devices and the opportunity. And part of the reason, after I was appointed last April, about a year ago, I went out to Silicon Valley and spent some time with the Google team. And initially was a little bit skeptical. I'd heard about and read about some of the things they were doing with the glucose sensing lens, and thought, well, it's worth a shot, worth bringing a couple of my MD PhDs and others out there to really spend some time with them. And they really blew our face off in terms of what they were doing around smart devices and the ability to, not only from a glucose sensing lens perspective, or looking at autofocus within the accommodating space, but looking at how could we leverage devices to measure intraocular pressure and glaucoma, for example. So I think, to complement, I agree with a lot of what Ludwig had said earlier in terms of, mining the data, developing the right architecture and the right systems to capture the data. But I also would add on, the element of patient outcomes, number one, and secondarily, the importance of smart devices and the wearable space. And I think there's been a lot of hype in this space, but I also think there's really quite a lot of potential as well.
Okay, thanks. Michael and Murthy, Amazon, we know, is the reigning and undisputed champion as we think about in customer service. And in fact, I was reading an article, the CEO's fond of saying that we're not competitor obsessed, we're customer obsessed. We start with what the customer wants and we work backwards. If you applied this tenet to ophthalmology, how do you ensure your organization is truly customer centric? Michael, I'll give it to you first. Murthy, you can build on it.
Well, I hope we're customer centric, and we certainly are looking to improve every day. The majority of our people, if you take out manufacturing, and in some cases we manufacture ourselves, in some cases we use contract manufacturing, about 80% of our employees are customer facing, i.e. they have some interaction with the customers. So it is very important to us that we listen to customers, and most customers have my email address, they have Ari's email address, and it's really cultural that and also with patients, that we'll take any call and we'll try to follow up. So I don't think it's something that you can dictate. I think it's something that has to be part of the culture of the company. I've had a chance to talk to a number of physicians already at this meeting, and it's really always the first question I ask is what can we do better, and where are we letting you down? And again, I think in this industry, I think all companies are actually quite good at this. I think I talked about spaces we like, and I talked about earlier where physicians really make decisions, and you better be willing to listen to your customers and adapt and find products, or you're not going to be successful. So I think that's key to ophthalmology, and I see it with all the companies, that all the companies are always striving to, work with customers, and so I think that's good. I think it's a good culture. We see it in dermatology too, which is our other large business, where that interaction with the customer is a source of innovation. And every day we just try to get better. I think a key to it is also trying to stay humble throughout the organization, and the customer's king, and listening and responding opposed to getting into intellectual arguments is kind of the approach we like to take.
Murthy?
Yes, so I spoke earlier about the geographic focus, and I think that's helped us a fair bit in terms of bringing the customer's needs into the corporate environment versus pushing a view outside. That wasn't working effectively all the time. But I also found that we were listening to customers, but we weren't acting with the right sense of urgency, and that had to change. Listening is one thing, but if you can't actuate on that and solve the customer's needs in a timely manner, then we haven't really done a job. And all of these new lenses and platforms I talked about really came from the customers telling us what the issues were, what the trade-offs were, and then we acted on that. But it's not just technology. There's a lot of other interactions with customers where they provide us with feedback in terms of how we engage with them. For me, the trick really is acting fast, not just listening.
Bill, you started this meeting off talking about all the companies that obviously have been influenced by this great session, but also a lot of companies doing IPO activity. I'd love to hear, do you think that's sustainable in our industry? Is it just a short-term activity? Is it just trying to find funding? What's the rationale?
Well, I hope it's sustainable, but there's some market factors that are outside of our control here. Relative to the public markets and the availability of capital and the ebb and flow there. And I think, we try to understand it and track it and respond to it. When we finance a company, we have a base plan that we will finance the company to cash flow positive, okay? Mm-hmm. And so that it isn't dependent, okay, on a public market exit or a public market financing. If, as we're on that path, the public markets are open and receptive and the quality of the company and the appeal is right, then it's terrific, to have the IPO path. And candidly, what happens periodically, and I've had this happen a few times, is we're on our way to an IPO, kind of no kidding. That's what our focus is. We're trying to get there and do well there. And that path then stimulates corporate interest. Very candidly, there's a lot of public information about the company, and it's an open process, et cetera. So we view it as an important aspect. It's not required, but it really enhances the overall innovation market if that IPO market is friendly.
Okay, Martha and Jeff. Get the two A's here. Improving access to health care, major goal of government. In fact, research indicates there's going to be a shortage of physicians, especially in the EU, in the near future. What can industry do in ophthalmology to help prepare for this approaching gap between supply and demand for quality care?
I'll answer from the perspective of Abbott, since we are primarily in surgical. There's obviously tremendous needs in the pharmaceutical space as well. So the one thing we do know is the number of surgeons isn't going to grow very fast in Europe or in the US for that matter. And therefore, the only way you'll treat more patients with limited budgets is to become more efficient. And there is a lot of inefficiency in the system. In recent years, when you look at cataract surgery, there's been a fair bit of complexity that industry has added to cataract surgery. For good reason. There have been reasons for that in order to improve outcomes. I think the next phase is to simplify and to relentlessly take the complexity out of the OR. And the end goal has to be improved predictability, reduce standard deviations, and reduce case times. So that'll drive the productivity of the physicians up and maximize the OR time. But I think by doing this effectively, you also give the surgeons an opportunity to delegate some of their workload to other healthcare professionals. So not everything needs to be done by the surgeon, but you need predictability and a nice system to be able to do that. One only needs to look at two what should be relatively simple things for a surgeon. IOL, power calculations, and toric alignment, and there's nothing simple about it today. With multiple diagnostic platforms, pre-op, intra-op, all throwing information at the surgeon, and there's no simple algorithmic approach to determine consistent outcomes each time. So I think there's a lot of opportunity here to simplify.
Okay. Jeff?
You know, I would add on to your comments, Murthy. First of all, by agreeing with you in terms of the importance of simplification and integration. One of the things that we're spending a lot of time on now in Irvine, just north of here, we have about 1,500 people in R&D and manufacturing of our surgical equipment. And we're working a lot now on really driving integration so that we can drive improved efficiency, because I think you highlighted the fact that there's going to be a real dearth of supply on the ophthalmology front. And to your second point around delegation, that was a point I was going to make, which is I think there really is an opportunity to offload more and more responsibilities to the optometry community. We have, you know, I think quite a good, highly trained optometry community here in the U.S. that adds a lot of value. I was meeting with a surgeon earlier today who was saying, you know, 95+% of his referrals come from the optometry community in Atlanta, where he's the leading surgeon doing cataract surgery. And so I think that's an element. And when I look at from a patient need perspective, you know, there's still 20 million people around the world that are blind from cataracts. There are still, you know, there's 25 million people that have age-related macular degeneration, and, you know, no cure today for geographic atrophy. You've got over 90 million, 91 million people that have diabetic retinopathy, with the, you know, incredible boom in obesity that we're seeing in diabetes around the world. And, you know, I think 65, 70 million people in glaucoma. And given the cost pressures that are inherent, you know, to healthcare today, and the huge growth that we've seen in healthcare spending, which has been roughly 3 times GDP growth over the last 4 or 5 decades, I think it's incumbent upon us as leaders in the industry to not only look for streamlining and integration, you know, of technologies within the operating room, but also to look at how do we ensure that we're serving different populations. You know, we have a very big business in emerging markets. Our products are, like, you know, Murthy is very focused geographically. We're in 180 countries, almost $3 billion of sales in emerging markets. And, you know, there are segments of the market where you really have to take a mid-tier approach or take a slightly different approach than the very premium approach that historically has been the modus operandi predominantly here in the U.S.
So Ludwin and Michael, building off what Jeff kind of just stirred in my thought process here, you think about geographical expansion, and I have to say that I think the regulatory hurdles are not as severe as they've been in the past. Right here in the U.S., I think we're seeing much better. So how do you determine where's the next big geography? How do you determine where you're going to advance, you know, across the globe? And I'll go to Ludwin, you first, then Michael, you back it up.
Actually, we do not make that decision based on regulatory typically. So our general approach is to develop products for the globe, right? So if we develop a product, we try to get approval in all countries. And it's just that in some countries it takes longer and others are faster, but in general we try to get products to market everywhere. Looking at different geographies, it's more about the opportunity and the need of these geographies. If you think of the emerging countries, for example, the needs are very different. And there's a huge opportunity. China, India, Southeast Asia, for example, South America, and they have very special needs. So we look at the opportunity, we try to understand these needs, and then develop products very specifically targeted at these needs.
Michael?
Sure. We take, I think, a slightly different approach than most healthcare companies, pharma companies, in terms of, as we think about geographies. For us, it's all about growth, and where is the growth going to happen? And and that's how we deploy our capital, because in the end of the day, that's the most, for a company, where you deploy your capital is probably the most important decision the CEO and the boards make. So we're looking for countries that will have long-term growth potential. It tends to be the emerging markets. So we'll put a lot more capital into countries like Vietnam and Indonesia. We're making a lot of investments in Middle East, Northern Africa. We also like to invest in markets that are out of favor. Like right now, we're looking in Russia pretty seriously at a number of things, because most companies will not invest in Russia right now, given the political environment. Similarly in the Middle East. So we do that because prices go down, you can get better deals, but we try to invest based on the long term. What's the world going to look like in 20, 30, 40 years? We've always invested heavily in the U.S., and we will continue to do so, given what I believe to be really good long-term growth potential. But there are some markets where we sort of de-emphasize from a capital deployment standpoint. The other thing that drives our decision making is healthcare truly is largely a local phenomenon. If you look at the most prescribed drugs in some countries, it varies wildly to other countries. Part of that has to do with demographics. Part of it has to do with just social customs. So we'll never try to force a product everywhere in the world. We'll leave that up to our local management to make that decision, because they're the ones closest to the customer. And so it's a slightly different approach. I think compared to some traditional companies.
Bill, I remember we've had many discussions. You sit on many public boards, but you have the unique opportunity to sit on small company boards, and you sit there and you say, we have to learn to fail fast. Why can't the large companies take the same mentality that small companies have on failing fast?
No, I think they can. I think they can at a project level. And there's an honest difference if you have a portfolio of projects in a single entity, and then you're measuring the progress and performance of all those projects. And one of my biggest setbacks as a decision maker at Chiron Vision is I killed a project because it was in trouble at budget time. And we redeployed capital. And later, I regretted it because it was a worthy project that later reemerged in a private company and did beautifully well. And so one of my learnings as maybe a leader, business leader in that setting, is you have to be really thoughtful when you're dealing across a portfolio, because every project will have its ups and downs. And it's awful if the down is at budget time. And so one of the things I love about the small private companies is we only have one or two bets. And we stay on task. And sometimes we overdo it. And I look back and I say, yep, 3 years ago and $22 million ago, we should have killed it. But more often than not, if we learn and are candid and capable, we learn from that iterative process, keep it funded, redirect, and maybe do really well. So it's just a different setting. There's not a right way and a wrong way. It's just two different settings. And so often the small companies will bring projects through that tough iterative phase more efficiently than a large corporation can for two reasons. One is they're more nimble, and the other is they have to do it. It's do it or die.
Jeff?
I just want to reflect on that, because I think the conventional wisdom that large pharmaceutical companies don't innovate well is largely true, right? If you look at the last few decades of innovation that's come out of big pharma, it hasn't been that strong. I think there are some exceptions. I think Novartis is certainly one of them. And one of the brilliant things that I think Dan Vasella, our longtime chairman and CEO, did wisely was he was willing to go against the grain and create a totally separate culture where research on the pharmaceutical side was totally detached from budgets, and not, I mean, you know, not that we don't focus on budgets within a certain level of the organization, but he disaggregated it from development. He said, look, we're going to move, you know, our research headquarters to be, you know, together with, you know, Harvard and MIT and Cambridge, where we can attract great talent, and it's paid off really well. You know, and one of the things that they did, you know, Mark Fishman, who is a cardiologist and Harvard Med School, and I think still, you know, has a part-time faculty appointment there, is creating small teams of people, really a very innovation-focused culture that operates in many ways more like a series of startups. So if I look at, you know, we took, for example, last Thursday and Friday, I took about 25 leading glaucoma specialists from around the world to the Novartis Institutes of Biomedical Research, which is, you know, Mark Fishman's research organization. And, you know, what was amazing is as we listened to the scientists and we did, you know, lab tours and a number of other things and reviewed the projects, a number of them commented that they don't talk about budgets. Money doesn't come up because they're focused on the science. And our view at Novartis has been, if you focus on the science, you do the right thing for patients, and you don't worry too much about the market size, you're really focused on, will this make a difference for patients, you can have incredible returns. One quick example, the story of Gleevec, you know, which is a drug that, you know, our marketeers at Novartis originally said, you know, kill it, right? This is, you know, a small population of people with chronic myeloid leukemia, and, you know, they die pretty quickly, and, you know, this drug can be $100-200 million. We're going to waste money on it. And Dan Vasilis said, no, we're going to let, you know, the science dictate how we do this. And, you know, we went ahead full steam with it. And ultimately it turned into a product that extended people's lives for years and became, you know, I think at peak sales, Gleevec was, you know, $4.5 billion, you know, today, something around that level. And it's Novartis's largest product. And I think that speaks to a culture where, you know, you're allowing scientists to do what they do best, which is great research, great early stage scientific innovation, and not make them too beholden to budget, so you avoid, Bill, you know, the kinds of situations that you're talking about where we could make some pretty bad decisions as business people if we're just going in and driving the research allocation decisions. And frankly, you know, it takes a while, and the results, you know, speak for themselves in terms of what's coming out of Mark Fishman's pipeline.
Okay, that's, you know, the price of admission is just to have the thought from these five gentlemen. So let's give them a big round of applause and thank them for their time.